Boom, 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 boom. A side, B side, what side are you on?
Have you ever thought to yourself, man, I sure would like to make a podcast. I've got so much to say about blank. Well, if you haven't heard about Anchor, you really should. It is the easiest way to make a podcast, and it's absolutely free. All right, I'm going to tell you why it's so easy. Okay, so with Anchor, there's creation tools that allows you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many others. And you can even make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. Trust me, I'm so excited about this. You can be too. Download the free Anchor app or go to Anchor FM to get started. Welcome back to A-Side, B-Side podcast. That's Adam Weingarten, and I'm who?
Brooke Summers.
I just wanted to catch you off guard this week.
Didn't know there'd be a quiz.
I wanted to see if you were paying attention.
I mean, most of the time.
All right, so let's see. How was your week?
It was good. It's very fun here in the frozen tundra. We haven't had a high above 10 degrees in about 10 days.
Mm-hmm.
So that's super cool. You go outside and everything freezes immediately.
Mm-hmm.
It's fun to convince our four-legged friends that they should do their business outside when there's no way in HE double hockey sticks that I would do my business outside in negative 20-degree wind chill. But we evidently asked them, which it's probably not very fair.
I mean, you don't have to take her outside.
No, she won't go inside. Like, we've had really long conversations about what the toilet's for, and doesn't seem to be landed. So,
yeah.
And also, like, it'd be hard for her to get up there. She's not that big a dog.
Like Queen, she likes to be free.
Yeah, she'd love to be free. She also does the thing where we're out there, she does her business, and then all of a sudden, one of her legs has suddenly got a thing. She's like a soccer star who suddenly pulled up limp, holds her leg up, and it's like, oh, I'm like, okay, yeah, keep walking. And then she'll do the other leg, and I'm like, you can't even remember which leg you're pretending is hurt.
She just wants the attention. She doesn't care how she gets it.
And then usually by the third leg, then I'm carrying her. So that's, it works. I am well trained.
So this week, I started some new stuff on Netflix and Hulu.
Nice.
And so started Firefly Lane. It's a new show. It's got Katherine Heigl and is it Sarah Chalk? Yeah,
yeah.
So from Roseanne and from Scrubs, yeah. And they're like lifelong best friends, and it's kind of their story.
And like evidently Katherine Heigl's back, so there's that.
What do you mean? I said her name.
Well, no. I hadn't heard from her in a while.
Oh yeah.
She hadn't been.
She's had kids and got married. She was taking a break.
Well, that's fair.
Also, HBO Max dropped. No, I'm sorry, Netflix. I'm thinking HBO because of Euphoria, but Netflix dropped Malcolm and Marie. So basically, Malcolm and Marie was like the first movie that was recorded in quarantine. Yeah,
so I've seen trailers for that because you log into Netflix and then like it starts playing, and I'm like, well, what's going on? But the trailers don't seem to give me a lot of info. Is it just like a bad relationship and they're trapped together?
So they're not trapped. It's basically one night. It's one night in their relationship. It's a couple that comes home from a movie premiere, and basically it's the ups and downs of their relationship in a night.
Gotcha. Okay. So it's kind of like the one with Kylo Ren and
Marriage Story. Yeah. And what's her name? The one that's married to Colin Jost, Scarlett Johansson.
Yeah.
Yes, but I didn't like it. I didn't like it. I love Zendaya, love John David Washington.
Mm-hmm. Who is Denzel's son, who used to play in the NFL.
Yes. And he sounds, when he talks, he sounds just like his dad. They don't look alike. He looks more like his mom, but they sound exactly the same. It was very toxic. I mean, I guess it's probably one of the more real relationship movies out there, but if I wanted toxic, I guess I could go back to an ex.
Yeah, yeah. It looks very intense. It's like, it's 10 p.m. on a Tuesday night. What am I going to watch tonight? Oh, people fighting? I'm good.
Yeah. I just, for
I'm
as excited as
sure
I
they're very
was,
good in it, but
yeah, they are. They are. Don't get me wrong. They're very good in it. I didn't like it. I just thought it was too much. It was too toxic for too long. And like I said, if I wanted that much toxicity, I'd go back to an ex.
and it's crossed over already in terms of like being dropped as a reference. I was watching the ESPN show Around the Horn. They've got 4 columnists all talking about things, and they compared a current relationship between Dak Prescott, who's the quarterback for the Cowboys, and the Cowboys as just like that movie.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, that movie's been out like not that long, and it's already dropping references in a completely different style of pop culture.
Yeah. But there's that. Also, Lupin or Lupin, but the French way, Lupin on Netflix is really good. And it's got Omar Sy. And I don't know if you watched The Untouchables. It's the movie Kevin Hart and Bryan Cranston did the American remake. I can't remember the name of it, but.
Oh, yeah. Where the one guy, it's him and his assistant or doctor, basically.
His assistant, yeah. So basically, it was done the year before, and it's a French movie that was originally done before the Bryan Cranston Kevin Hart movie, and the French version, The Untouchables, is amazing, and Omar Sy is one of the leads, and so he's also the lead in this show, Lupin, based on I'm going to say it wrong. Arsène Lupin, which is a book about a gentleman robber, basically.
Okay. Yeah. So he's like a thief, but kind of like if James Bond was a thief.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's kind of got that vibe. Like obviously not a secret agent, but kind of that vibe of dashing and charming and
very much so.
Yeah.
And then I started Shameless UK. I've already finished. I watched Shameless, the US version, and I was a big fan. And so I kept hearing about Shameless UK. And then they were talking about it on another podcast that I love, My Favorite Murder. And they mentioned that James McAvoy was on it. And I was like, what? Oh, I'm watching this right now.
He's good. I like him.
He was very good on that. So it was before he kind of blew up.
Yeah.
So he's very, very, very good. He's one of the major players on there as well.
It's like the guy Tom Huddleston, who plays Loki, is like on a really old version of one of my favorite shows, Midsummer Murders. And he's like super young, and he's got all this like crazy curly hair. And you're like, is that Tom Huddleston? That's Tom Huddleston. What's he doing here? So it's fun to see that.
Hiddleston, by the way.
Hiddleston. Wow, he's probably not listening. Sorry, Tom. Or Tom's family.
Also, we want to say a big thank you to your friend Roger Fringer, who, of course, Janice bought us coffee and bought some merch not too long ago, and Roger bought us some coffee, and he said, congrats, because I said their name properly.
Oh yeah.
So, do people say their name wrong a lot?
Yeah, it's like Finger or Flinger.
Oh, so people can't read.
Basically, they just assume they know what they're seeing. Like my last name should not be hard. It is Weingarten. But like when I was a kid, we'd always know when some telemarketer was calling because they were like, can we speak to Mr. Weingarten? Nope, there's no that name here. That's not how you say that. So it's amazing. I do high school announcing for basketball and football, and I always try to go to the opposing team and ask how to say names because there's often names where I don't want to make an assumption. And then even sometimes after they have told me how to say it and I've written down it phonetically and it's like ready, like I have a little like ways that I'm like, okay, this is what you need to remember. So you say it correctly. In the heat of the moment, sometimes I'm like saying it wrong. And it's instead of buskins, it's bushkins. And it's like, that doesn't make any sense. Like, why did I do that? So it's hard sometimes.
Well, I'm happy that I was able to say it properly, and I'm making sure I'm saying it again properly. So thank you to Roger Fringer for buying us coffee and for listening. And Adam, he says, loves the true crime stories and also loves hearing the childhood stories from you guys.
Yeah, because honestly, he was there for most of them. Like we go way back, like 4th grade.
Mm-hmm.
So he had the misfortune of living with me on 3 separate occasions. So poor guy.
So thank you to Roger and everyone that has taken time to not just donate, but also to give us a rating and a review on Apple. We thank you so much because it really does help. If you want to support the podcast, the easiest way to do that is to go to Apple and give us a rating. You can leave a review if you'd like. We'd love a review, a good one.
And honestly, hearing from people that have listened is like the number one, the number 2 motivator to keep doing it. Number 1 is I'm scared of Brooke. But number 2 is that people will be like, hey, we listened to this week's episode, or I'm like 2-3 episodes behind. So it's those little bits of encouragement go a long way. So it is appreciated.
Scared of me? I'm not going to beat you up.
You could.
I'm smaller than you.
Yeah.
I am feisty though.
Yeah, you're feisty, and you were in the military, and I just signed up for getting the recruiting thing so I could get a keychain. So there's a big difference there in terms of execution.
All right, so this week I believe it's my turn to start first.
Yes, I always love that because then I get like some time to kind of like percolate.
All right, Adam. So last week we talked about, well, over the last 2 weeks, really, we talked about a really prolific murderer. Wouldn't call him a serial killer because he wasn't like he wasn't doing it for power, or he was kind of doing it for power, but there was no motivation behind it. He was just a hitman.
Yeah, he was a professional killer.
Yeah, he just liked to murder.
Yeah, it was like, I'm good at this. It's a very niche industry.
But what about one of the first, if not the first, American serial killer?
So we're going way back.
We're going way back. I got to give a shout out to listener Brad Butler for this one. He is actually the one that suggested it. Just like Brad, you can submit a story to us if you'd like to hear it, or maybe a hometown homicide you'd like to share. You can do that at asidebsidepodcast.square.site, or you can email us at asidebsidepodcasts@gmail.com. So this, like I said, is the story of America's first serial killer. Dr. Henry Howard Holmes, also known as Henry M. Howard, Henry Gordon, Alexander Bond, O.C. Pratt, D.T. Pratt, A.E. Cook, G. Howell, and H.H. Holmes. So Dr. Henry Howard Holmes was a con artist, a trigamist. That's a person that has 3 spouses.
Wow.
He was involved in multiple lawsuits, at least 50 in Chicago alone. And to top it all off, that cherry on top, murder.
I can't believe he didn't go with Triple H at one point.
So he was born Hermann Webster Mudget on May 16th of 1861 in Gilmanton, New Hampshire. His parents, Levi Horton Mudget and Theodate Page Price, both of whom were first-generation descendants of English immigrants. They were the first in the area. Mm-hmm. Hermann was third. He was behind older sister Ellen, older brother Arthur, and in front of Henry and Mary.
So he was the middle child.
He was the middle child. Yep.
Yeah.
He was born into an affluent family and is said to have enjoyed a very privileged childhood and was said to be unusually intelligent at a very early age. Which,
that's a little scary.
We will see how this intelligence gets twisted and turned all about.
Should have got that kid more books.
Herman's parents were devout Methodists. His father was from a farming family, and he himself farmed from time to time, as well as working as a trader and a house painter. So when Mr. Mudget, or we're going to just call him Holmes from here on out, was 16, he graduated from Phillips Exeter Academy and began teaching in Gilmanton, and later moved over to nearby Alton. Holmes married Clara Lovering on July 4th of 1878 at the age of 17, and then their son, Robert Lovering Mudget, was born on February 3rd of 1888. He was 19 at the time. He was born in Loudon, New Hampshire. Side note, as an adult, Robert became a certified public accountant and served as a city manager of Orlando, Florida. Just a side note, so you know, not quite on the same level as his dad. So at the age of 18, H.H. Holmes entered the University of Vermont in Burlington. He dropped out after 1 year. Later, in 1882, he enrolled at the University of Michigan's Department of Medicine and Surgery. And after passing all of his exams, he graduated in 1884. He almost didn't graduate, though, because a widowed hairdresser accused him of making a false promise of marriage.
Oh.
Somehow he was able to escape that accusation and graduate. While at university, he worked in the anatomy lab under the guidance of Professor Hurd, the chief anatomy instructor at the time. Hermann, or Holmes, then had an internship in New Hampshire under Nahum White, who had 17 siblings, by the way. I'm just saying. There's no relevance here to the story of that, but I just thought, wow, 17.
That's a lot.
Mm-hmm.
That is like 2 baseball teams worth of kids.
That's a lot of kids.
Yeah.
So Nahum White was a big-time advocate of human dissection. This is going to come up later when Holmes is a murder suspect.
What are you a big-time advocate of? Well, I like human dissection.
Yeah, he's going to claim that he's not a murderer, but a mere insurance fraudster. He's going to admit to using some cadavers to defraud life insurance companies several times in college.
Man.
Fact. While at the University of Michigan, he stole corpses and used them to make false claims and experimented on them. All right. Let's not forget, H.H. is married, and people that lived with the pair said that Holmes became abusive and violent with Clara. It got so bad that in 1884, before his graduation, she left him and moved back to New Hampshire. She didn't keep up with him after that. She just left.
Probably a good choice.
Yeah. So that's according to a letter from Clara to Dr. Arthur MacDonald, a noted criminologist who researched and wrote about H.H. Holmes. After graduation, he moved to Moore's Folk, New York. And while there, rumors began circulating that he'd been seen around with a young man who disappeared. Holmes claimed that the young man went home to Massachusetts. No investigation into the disappearance took place. And H.H. hightailed it out of town. You've already got people looking at you. They're already suspicious of you. So he just vanished.
Like, time to go.
Next, he pops up in Philadelphia, and he got a job working as a keeper at Norristown State Hospital. It was a psychiatric hospital that was originally called the State Lunatic Hospital of Norristown. And from what I could find, a keeper was like housekeeping maintenance.
So that name indicates that there were other state hospitals?
Well, I'm guessing so, yeah.
Well, that's a lot of state hospitals.
There's usually more than one in a state.
Luckily, I have not visited more than one.
So he quit Norristown after just a few days, and he soon began working at a drugstore. But there were some issues because while he was working there, a young boy died after taking medicine that was purchased at the store. Of course, Holmes denies any wrongdoing, and he left Philadelphia and changed his name to Henry Howard Holmes, H.H. Holmes, to avoid any of his past deeds from being exposed. Then he pops up in Chicago. But we're going to pit stop first. So in 1886, while still married to Clara, Holmes takes his next bride, Myrta Belknap. She was born in 1862 in Pennsylvania. They marry in Minneapolis, Minnesota.
Uh-oh.
Uh-huh. A few weeks after his marriage to Myrta, H.H. finally filed for divorce from Clara, citing infidelity on her part.
Yeah, because she's like 7 states away and can't fight the charge. So, yeah, it was her fault.
Well, and he's the one that's remarried. He's the one that was cheating, technically.
Yeah, you'd think so.
Hey, but what's a little cheating in marriage for us? Cheating in your marriage for a serial killer,
It's pretty common, it seems, honestly.
Yeah. So the lawsuit went nowhere because there was no proof of his claims. Chances are Clara never even knew that the lawsuit was even out there.
Right.
That's at least the inference that can be made based on surviving paperwork, the divorce was never finalized. And on June 4th of 1891, the case was dismissed on the grounds of, quote, want of prosecution. That means a case is dismissed by a judge because nothing has happened in the case to move it forward for a while, or maybe a hearing was missed by someone. So since there was no hearing and there was no proof, they dropped the case.
Right.
So long story short, Holmes and Clara remained married. There was no divorce.
Oh, because she didn't show up, because it was dismissed.
Right.
Gotcha.
Yes.
Okay.
So H.H. Holmes and Murda had a daughter, Lucy Theodate Holmes, on July 4th of 1899. July 4th, very consistent date for him because he also married Clara, the first wife, on July 4th, 12 years earlier. Lucy
this way he doesn't have to for learn a new anniversary.
Yeah, exactly.
Smart.
Or birth date or anything. Everything just happens on July 4th.
Yeah.
So Lucy was born in Inglewood, Chicago, Illinois. And later in life as an adult, she becomes a school teacher. So the apple does seem to fall far from the tree.
Yeah.
Rolls down the hill. Right.
Small people. Keeps going.
Okay. So
getting away from that tree.
On January 14th of 1894, Holmes marries for the third time, this time to Georgiana York in Denver, Colorado. And yes, he is still married to Clara and to Murda, which is why he is a trigamist.
Yeah, that's impressive. I mean, he's like disappointing women in multiple states at the same time.
In August of 1886, Hermann, who is now Henry Howard Holmes, makes his way to Chicago using H.H. Holmes. He began working for Elizabeth Holton at her drugstore in Inglewood. So today, Inglewood is part of Chicago, but in the 1800s, it was a little quiet community independent of the Windy City, and it was located on the southern outskirts.
Gotcha.
So H.H. proved to be a really hard worker, and he saved up, and he was eventually able to purchase the store from Elizabeth Holton. Now, there's lots of stories about Elizabeth Holton's husband being an old man who mysteriously disappeared along with his wife, died of murder or whatever. But the book H.H. Holmes, The True Story of the White City Devil by Adam Selzer, said that Elizabeth's husband, Dr. Holton, who was only a few years older than H.H. and a fellow Michigan alum, both the Holtons lived into the 20th century. So there's no truth to the rumors that he killed them.
No, so he was accused, but
there were rumors that were like, oh, they disappeared. They kind of just retired and moved away.
Yeah, they were like, we're done.
Yeah. Once he bought the store from her, they just kind of,
went like, we never liked any of you anyway. Going to Michigan.
H.H. purchased a lot across from the store where construction had begun for a 2-story mixed-use building with apartments on the top floor, retail spaces, including a new drugstore on the first floor. So Holmes was sued in 1888 when he refused to pay the architects and Edna Iron and Steel. In 1892, he was unfazed and added a 3rd story. Incredibly, he was able to convince investors and suppliers that he intended to use the building as a hotel during the upcoming Columbian Exposition, even though the hotel portion was never completed. Ever the scammer, H.H. hid the furniture that the furniture suppliers had dropped off, but he hadn't paid for. He hid the furniture in hidden rooms and passages throughout the building.
Also, this building has hidden rooms and passages, so this is a sign here. That's not a great sign.
Oh yeah. Also, in this building, there were soundproof rooms and hallway mazes, some of which ended up leading to nowhere.
Totally normal.
Several of the rooms were outfitted with chutes that would drop straight down to the basement, where H.H. had vats of acid, quicklime, and a crematorium to dispose of his witnesses.
Damn.
Look, nothing good is happening in a building that's not like a mortuary that has a crematorium in it. Like nothing.
No. I mean, this guy built an evil lair. It just wasn't in a volcano. Which, I mean, missed opportunity.
So, according to an article in the Chicago Tribune from March of 1893, after a search of the building, all of the oddities that were discovered and made the news caused investors to pull out of the deal. There was a jeweler in the building that showed them the article. There was a jeweler in the building that showed them the article. That's going to come back up.
I was going to say, I'm guessing is the important part of that.
So in 1892, the hotel was mostly complete and it had 3 stories and a basement and stretched the entirety of the block. The first floor was storefronts and the third floor held apartments. Now, I know you're thinking I skipped a floor, but I didn't. I'm saving that.
Ooh.
The second floor was H.H.'s tricked out torture toyland.
Which sounds like a horrible theme park.
Yeah. This floor had the previously mentioned chutes into the basement, rooms with hinged walls and false partitions. Some rooms had many doors. Some had one. There were rooms with secret passageways, airtight rooms connected to gas pipelines that were essentially gas chambers, doors that opened into brick walls, and hallways and staircases that led nowhere. H.H. would use the chutes to send the bodies into the basement where he had surgical tables waiting, lined with a vast array of medical tools to be used to dissect the bodies. He would then take the victims' organs and the bones out to sell on the black market and to medical institutions. Now, this is a huge, huge, huge building, massive rooms, massive construction. So you're probably like, well, how come none of the builders or architects reported him?
Right.
So you have to think about this. He was constantly switching things up. I would assume non-payment was the least of the issue. He didn't want anybody to put a full picture together. So between the non-payments and finding new contractors and finding new builders, new architects, there was always a new rotation of people in there in different parts. So nobody was able to put together the full picture.
It's kind of like when I worked at Red Lobster back in high school. We would have one person make the first part of the cheesy biscuits, and then somebody else made the second part. So no one knew the full recipe.
It's exactly the same.
Except with murder. Because, I mean, those cheesy biscuits are heavenly, not murder.
So to top it all off, all of the rooms were outfitted with an alarm system so that whenever a person stepped out into the hallway or headed downstairs, a buzzer would alert him in his room.
So if anybody tried to escape, the warden knew what was going on.
Mm-hmm. So one of Holmes's earliest known victims was his mistress. Yeah, 3 wives and a mistress. That's a movie title right there.
Not a movie that you're going to find on a certain type of venue.
So Julia Smythe was married to Ned Connor. Ned was living in the building and worked at the pharmacy jewelry counter. When Ned found out about the affair, he quit the jewelry counter and left town. So remember, there was a jeweler that tipped off the investors.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have solid proof that it was him, but it would make total sense that it was him.
It would fit the story.
Mm-hmm.
I'd be ticked off enough to maybe let somebody know.
Right. So Julia, along with her daughter, stayed in the hotel and continued on with H.H. It's believed that Ned was, in fact, one of H.H. victims, maybe because of the affair or the investors or both.
So when he left town, he probably just went down a chute.
Yeah, because he was not heard from again. It's too bad she did not know what an awful dude H.H. was. So both Julia and her daughter Pearl went missing on Christmas Eve of 1891. H.H. claimed that Julia died during an abortion. It was never confirmed. Okay, so let's say Julia did die during an abortion. Where's Pearl? What happened to Pearl? I'm not buying your abortion story.
Nope.
Another of H.H.'s love interests was Emmeline Segrand. Emmeline began working at the hotel in May of 1892 and disappeared that December. The same day they were set to marry.
This would be wife number 4.
It would be. If they had in fact married. Would that be a quadrigamist?
I think if we're following the linguistic style that we've already seen, yes.
Okay. All right. Another one of Holmes' supposed paramours that vanished was Edna Van Tassel. So H.H. worked at Chemical Bank on Dearborn Street. And while there, he met Benjamin Peitzel, who was a carpenter with a criminal past. And the two became really good friends.
Of course.
Birds of a feather. So Benjamin had a coal bin display in the storefront that was owned by H.H. Holmes. Benjamin became H.H.'s right-hand man for several criminal-minded machinations. A district attorney described Benjamin as Holmes's tool, his creature.
His guy.
Yeah,
sidekick,
his dude.
henchman.
In 1893, during the Columbian Exposition, aka the World's Fair, Holmes opened up his hotel to the public. It was supposed to be to celebrate Columbus's discovery of America, which is a whole nother thing we can talk about later.
I didn't even make it to America.
So the city was booming and the fair brought people in from around the world. And around this time, actress Minnie Williams moved to Chicago from Texas, where she met H.H. at the unemployment office. There are rumors.
Doesn't this guy have like 7 jobs already? He's at the unemployment office too?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm telling you, this guy is remember, he's extremely intelligent.
Yeah, he's one of these guys with like the spinning plates on the sticks.
So there's a rumor there were rumors at the time that the pair actually met years earlier in Boston, but it is unconfirmed. Holmes offered the one-time actress and railroad heiress a job at the hotel as his personal stenographer, and she said yes. It should be noted that young H.H. Holmes, to some, could be considered very charming and very handsome. That's how he's getting all these ladies.
Yeah, evidently being, a weird, eccentric guy with 7 jobs works.
Yeah. So Holmes was somehow able to convince Minnie to transfer to him the deed to her property in Fort Worth. Now, remember, they met at the unemployment office, but they met under the name he was using of Alexander Board.
Because he got bored of all his other jobs and just decided to create a new one who's getting unemployment.
I guess so, yeah. Or maybe he might have just been scoping the place out for victims. You never know.
Yeah. I figured while he's there, he's like, I'll pick up a check, might as well.
So in April of 1893, Minnie transferred the deed. Holmes notarized the transfer, then later signed the deed over to Benjamin under the name Benton T. Lyman, and H.H. using O.C. Pratt. This dude just loves initials, apparently.
Yeah. Well, because it creates mystery. What does OC stand for? Orange County?
So in Texas, Pratt and Lyman began construction of another hotel, but the Texans weren't feeling the two. There was just something about the two of them that rubbed them the wrong way, and they ran them out of town, them and their fraudulent ways out of town.
Oh, wow. Nice.
Yeah. Kudos to you, Texas. Yeah, exactly.
Like, this guy's never worn Spurs. Look at his hat. It's like a 7-gallon at least.
In May, Holmes and Minnie, pretending to be husband and wife, rented an apartment in Lincoln Park. Minnie's sister Nanny came to visit. Later in July, Nanny wrote a letter to her aunt that she had planned to travel Europe with brother Harry. Minnie and Nanny were never seen alive again after July 5th of 1893.
Oof.
Holmes was very entrepreneurial minded. He still had connections from his med school days, and he used those connections to sell skeletons to medical labs and schools. According to an article on Mental Floss, he and sometimes a hired assistant were accused of stripping the flesh off the bodies, dissecting them, and preparing the viable skeletons. The rest of the remains would be tossed in pits of lime or acid, effectively breaking down any remaining evidence. By July of 1894, several insurance companies wanted Holmes' prosecuted for arson. So you see, in an effort to cover his criminal activities and cover huge mounting debts, he set fire to his hotel. It was planned to be very minimal damage when it was done. He filed a claim, but investigators suspected arson. To collect a payment, he would have to have gone in person and filed under one of his multiple aliases. So he never showed up. He never collected. He then started receiving threats of legal action and jail time from the many people that he owed money to. So Holmes flees Chicago and ends up in Fort Worth, where he had inherited, wink,
quote unquote,
wink, wink,
yeah,
the property from the Williams sisters that we talked about previously. So later, in July of 1894, H.H. was arrested and incarcerated for a brief time on one of the charges of selling mortgaged goods in St. Louis. I know. You're like, wait, what? We didn't even talk about St. Louis. The man gets around.
Yeah, he's just bouncing from place to place, staying one step ahead of the law.
It's like that Tupac song, I get around. Round and round we go. Okay. While in prison, he came up with a plan to fake his own death for a $10,000 life insurance policy. In 2021, that would be about $302,591.
So it's like $300,000.
Yeah.
Roughly. Yeah.
While in jail, before he was bailed out, Holmes had struck up a conversation with another known criminal, Marion Hedgepeth, aka the handsome bandit, the debonair bandit, the Montana bandit. Marion was serving a 25-year sentence for train robbery. He and the Hedgepeth Four took $20,000, or in today's money, $600,000 from that train robbery. So H.H. promised Marion $500 at that day, which would be about $15,000 today. He promised him $500 if he would give him the name of an attorney who could be trusted. Marion told Holmes about a young, ambitious St. Louis attorney named Jephthah Howe. Jephthah was actually in practice with his older brother, Alfonso. So Alfonso, from what I could see, I didn't deep dive into him, was more or less on the straight and narrow. Jephthah, however, was intrigued by Holmes's insurance scheme. Unfortunately for all, the scheme failed when the insurance company suspected arson. So he ditched the idea. Kind of. Not entirely. He's a con man after all.
It's a good idea. We're not going to give it away completely. We'll just, put it on hold.
We're going to put it on the back burner.
Yeah.
So he hatches up a similar plan, this time with his creature, Benjamin Peitzel. His boy, his tool.
This guy.
So Benjamin agreed to fake his death so that his wife would collect the $10,000, which, again, $305,000 in today's money. And they would split it with Holmes and Jephthah. Benjamin, under the name B.F. Perry, again with the initials, would pretend to be an inventor who was disfigured and killed in a laboratory explosion. Holmes was to put a cadaver in the lab in place of Benjamin, and Benjamin's wife would collect. This is H.H. Holmes that we're talking about. So he's not just a con man, he's a killer.
Yeah. So he's probably not going to fake a death.
So Holmes uses chloroform to knock Benjamin out, and then he sets him on fire using benzene. Benzene is a colorless, flammable liquid with a sweet odor, and it evaporates quickly when it is exposed to air. So Holmes collects the money and then went along with Benjamin's wife and children to New England, telling them the entire time that Benjamin was in hiding and that he was going to meet them later. Somehow, some way, he was able to manipulate Benjamin's wife to give him custody of 3 of her 5 children.
What?
Yes. The middle children, Alice, Nellie, and Howard. The oldest daughter and her baby remained with her. Her name is Carrie.
Okay.
Holmes and the three children traveled across the U.S. and Canada, while Carrie Peitzel traveled pretty much a parallel route across the U.S. and Canada, all using aliases along the way. And Holmes continued to lie to Carrie about her husband, claiming he was hiding out now in London. He was also lying to her about the status and whereabouts of Alice, Nellie, and Howard. At one point, when they were all in Detroit, just before crossing into Canada, they were separated by merely a few blocks, unbeknownst to Carrie. So I mentioned that he was lying to Carrie about Alice, Nellie, and Howard. In a confession, Holmes said while traveling with his wife, who was unaware of his antics, he forced Alice and Nellie into a large trunk and locked them inside. He then drilled a hole in the top of it and put the end of a hose through it, while attaching the other end to a gas line to asphyxiate the girls. He then buried their nude little bodies in the cellar of his rented home in Toronto. The home is no longer in existence. It was located on St. Vincent, which has been realigned into a part of Bay Street. So every villain story hopefully has a hero. Last week we talked about Kane, who came in with his sunglasses and witty one-liners like he was on CSI. Yeah. Well, our hero this week is Frank Geyer. He's a Philly detective that was assigned to investigate Holmes. Geyer was apparently present in Toronto when the bodies of Alice and Nellie were found. He wrote in his book, The Holmes Peitzel Case, that the deeper we dug, the more horrible the odor became. And when we reached the depth of 3 feet, we discovered what appeared to be the forearm of a human being. Frank went next to Indianapolis, where Holmes had rented a cottage. He reported visiting a local pharmacy where he bought drugs that he used to kill Howard. And he visited a repair shop to sharpen knives that he used to cut up Howard's body before burning it.
So he kills the dad, kills all the kids.
Mm-hmm.
Mom's the only one left that knows about the scam.
Mom, yep, and her oldest.
Oh, yeah. And the baby.
And the baby. So Howard's teeth and bone fragments were discovered in the chimney. On November 20th of 1894, Carrie Peitzel confessed to attempted insurance fraud by faking her husband's death. And she confessed because she began to suspect that her husband wasn't actually in hiding. Mm-hmm. Holmes had been telling her that, but of course we know, in fact, he killed him.
Killed this guy, his sidekick.
His tool. Yeah. So unbeknownst to Carrie, just before she confessed, Holmes was arrested in Boston on November 17th and accused of attempting to defraud Fidelity Mutual Insurance from Philadelphia. He had been tracked to Boston by the Pinkertons. Now, I don't know if you'd ever heard of the Pinkertons. I hadn't, so I had to look them up.
Oh, I love them.
So they're a private security guard detective agency that was established in the U.S. by Scotsman Alan Pinkerton in 1850. The company is still in existence and is a subsidiary of Securitas. Pinkerton himself became famous when he claimed to have foiled a plot to assassinate President-elect Abraham Lincoln, who later hired Pinkerton agents for his personal security during the Civil War. Holmes was held on an outstanding warrant for horse theft in Texas. Authorities were already suspicious because Holmes was prepared to flee the country with his third wife, who was still unaware of all of his illegal activities.
Well, so she says.
I don't know. You know what? I can believe it, though.
Yeah, well, this guy is like all over the place. Like you said, all the spinning plates and everything. So who knows? Who knows what they know? If they know what they know.
If you've watched ID Channel at all, there's entire shows that and there's a show called "Who the Bleep Did I Marry?" because people have no clue what their spouses are doing.
I mean, it also is probably a statement that everyone who's been married ever has said at one point.
I kind of believe her, though. So in Chicago, after the reports of finding the Peitzel girls, authorities began to investigate Holmes's property, which had been dubbed the Castle. Reporters caught wind and began to investigate as well. Nothing definitively linking Holmes to crimes in Chicago was found. All right, so don't fret, Adam. In October 1895, Holmes was tried and convicted for the murder of Benjamin Peitzel. His sentence? Death. Following his conviction, H.H. confessed to 27 murders in Chicago, Indianapolis, Toronto, although some of the murders he confessed to were the victims were still alive.
So he was just trying to pad his stats, basically.
Yeah, or they died like years after he confessed to killing them under completely different circumstances. Like, for instance, he claimed to have killed his former med school classmate, Robert Leacock, in 1886 for $40,000 in insurance money. Robert, however, died in Watford, Ontario, Canada on October 5th of 1889. That's according to the University of Michigan's catalog of students. Okay, so on top of the confessed murders, he also confessed to 6 attempted murders. Holmes was paid $7,500, which is $230,000 today, by Hearst newspaper for his confessions. Much, like I said, of that has found to be an exaggeration or lies.
Right. Yeah, they were like, hey, we're going to give you $200,000. Now we want a really good confession.
Mm-hmm.
So
Holmes's inclination to lie and exaggerate made it difficult for researchers to determine fact from fiction. On April 9th of 1896, Holmes signed a confession statement detailing his crimes. He later retracted that confession, saying he only killed one person, or excuse me, he only killed 2 women. You know, only 2. What's 2?
Yeah, I mean,
out of the 27 I admitted to, it was only 2.
Yeah. I was bluffing. You got me.
Along with the victims we've already discussed, there were a few others. There was Dr. Russell, a tenant of the castle, who was bludgeoned with a chain during a heated rent dispute. It was with his body that Holmes started his cadaver enterprise, selling corpses to medical students for $25 to $45 a piece. There was also Mr. Rogers of Virginia. No, not that Mr. Rogers. He was struck on the head by an oar during a fishing trip, upon which Holmes learned that he had money. There was also a maid named Lizzie. She was the first one suffocated in the vault. Holmes feared that his married janitor would run away with her. So do you remember I mentioned that name, Marion Hedgepeth, the criminal that Holmes used to get the attorney recommendation from, the handsome bandit?
Yes, the Montana bandit, the charming bandit.
Yeah.
Kind of 3 nicknames that all mean the same thing.
Right. Yeah, the debonair bandit. The Montana
debonair bandit. My bad. I just don't remember French words.
He actually helped bring down H.H. Holmes. While jailed with Marion, he was using an alias and told Marion the plot. Well, Marion, of course, he also promised Marion that $500. Well, he, of course, stiffed Marion.
Yeah, there you go.
I think it's funny that he's been brought down by accomplices in an insurance fraud, but, you know, whatever.
Yeah, I mean, it's the way to get people. I mean, there are rumors that that's how a certain former government official may be brought down in New York.
Oh,
So dealing with a certain charity that may not have been up and up with its finances.
Oh, wow. So it looks like it's Marion who had found out H.H.'s real name and exposed him. On May 7th of 1896, 9 days before his 35th birthday, Holmes was put to death by hanging in...
Wait. He did all this by 35? Gosh darn it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay, right. So...
That's just make me feeling old and unfulfilled.
Unfulfilled because you haven't killed 27 people and attempted to kill 6 more?
Yeah, but he built like 3 hotels and killed people in like 10 states and had 4 wives. I am way behind, at least on the wives and the hotels part.
But not the killing?
And the murders. Yeah, okay. I was still at 0.
Okay.
I mean, I did get that fly once, but it's more self-defense.
So he was put to death just before his 35th birthday by hanging at Myominsing Prison, also known as the Philadelphia County Prison, for the murder of Benjamin Pitezel. Right up until the moment of his death, Holmes was calm and cool. He showed no signs of real fear. He did, however, ask for his coffin to be buried 10 feet deep because he was concerned that grave robbers would steal his body and use it for dissection.
He's like, I don't want copycats to do exactly to me what I did to other people.
Yeah, karma. It's called karma, HH. It's called karma. Holmes's neck did not snap instantly.
Ooh,
Instead,
good.
It was a very slow death as he strangled. Strangulation deaths by hanging typically take 10 to 20 minutes. For Holmes, He hung, twitching, for 15 minutes before being declared dead after 20.
Wow.
His time of death, 10:25 a.m.
I mean, it couldn't have happened to a better person.
Right? On New Year's Eve of 1909, Marion, who had been pardoned for his info on Holmes, by the way, at the age of 53, he was shot and killed by a police officer, Edward Jabruick, during a botched robbery at a saloon in Chicago. He died at St. Anthony's Hospital and was buried in a poor man's grave. The castle itself, or Murder Mansion, as it has also become known, was gutted by a mysterious fire in August of 1895, according to the New York Times.
So mysterious.
Yeah. 2 men were seen entering the back of the building between 8 and 9 p.m. About a half an hour later, they were seen exiting and running away. Several explosions then took place, and it completely engulfed the hotel. Investigators checking into the fire found a half-empty gas can underneath the back steps of the building. The building somehow survived the fire and was used until 1938, when it was torn down. The site of the castle is now the Inglewood branch of the United States Postal Service.
All right. It's where they send all the dead letters.
Wow.
Yeah, I went full dad. I went full dad on that. I'm sorry.
In 2017, played with rumors that Holmes had somehow escaped his execution. His body was exhumed for testing by the University of Pennsylvania Museum of Archaeology. The exhumation that was led by Janet Mongay, I'm not quite sure. His coffin,
Professor M.
Professor M, yeah. His coffin was contained in cement, and as a result, the decomp was impacted because he was encased in cement. His clothing was almost perfect in its preservation, and his mustache was still intact. This is in 2017. His body was identified by his teeth. It was a positive match. After this, he was reburied. Finally, there are estimates of his victim range, and they range from 20 to 200.
Gee whiz. But he only claimed 22. That he couldn't. He literally couldn't remember all the names of the people he actually killed. So he just mentioned other people he knew.
Right. He was like, I know there was another one, so I'm just gonna say Ted.
Yeah.
Of course, in its time, this case was notorious. Interest in it was revived in 2013 with Eric Larson's book, The Devil in the White City, The Devil in the White City, Murder, Magic, and Madness at the Fair That Changed America. In 2006, the CW show Supernatural actually featured Holmes's ghost in season 2's episode called No Exit. In 2017, the History Channel aired an 8-episode limited docuseries entitled American Ripper, in which Holmes's great-grandson Jeff Mudget and former CIA analyst Emerald Fox investigated clues to prove that Holmes was the infamous London killer Jack the Ripper. Of course, we know the identity of Jack the Ripper is still unknown. It's not believed to be H.H. Holmes.
Yeah. Like, how could he be in two places at once?
Right. In 2019, an adaptation of The Devil in the White City with Martin Scorsese and Leonardo DiCaprio as EP was executive producer, was in development with Paramount TV and Hulu. As of this recording, publication has yet to commence. That, my dear desktop detectives, is the story of America's very first serial killer.
I'm just glad he got his comeuppance at least. Like I like the happy endings. Not that that's happy, but the justice endings. I don't know. I when the bad guy gets caught. Yeah,
right. The bad guy got caught and justice was served. He, had to pay for his crimes. So there you go.
This is Kevin Armstrong, your host for Movie Battle. Each episode, we take 2 films and put a superfan of each against one another to decide which one is best. The only rule we have is that you come correct. If you're interested in being a guest on Movie Battle, please check us out on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter.
Are you ready for less murder and more movies?
more fun. There's no movies in this one. But
You act like my side is supposed to be fun. Like every week you're like, that was just not fun. It's a true crime podcast.
sorry. I just got to mentally prepare better. It's
Just
tough.
know every week there's going to be murder.
I know
Every
that.
week.
It's actually, this one wasn't like there was a lot of murder. That's not what I'm saying. There was a lot of murder. But like it wasn't as graphic. I don't know. Like
Yeah.
it was
Like the last week's or the last couple of weeks, because we did the 2-parter, it was really graphic.
Yeah. I mean, this guy definitely a bad guy. I'm super glad he's dead. But there was like so much that he had going on that it was kind of distracting from the gruesomeness of the murder. I don't know.
Yeah.
He's like, oh, and he created this evil lair with shoots to drop people and lie after he killed them. I'm like,
And he was stealing
that's
people's
amazing.
money and selling body. You know, he
yeah,
had his hands in
committing
every.
insurance fraud. And yeah,
He had his hands in lots of pots. Okay.
like he was a full-on supervillain.
He was a murderous entrepreneur.
Yeah, I mean, like Lex Luthor's like, oh, insurance fraud. I never got into that. Shoot.
He's like selling cadavers. Ooh, idea.
I mean, who knew? I kill these people, but I'm gonna make a profit off of them too. It's good business sense. Okay, ready for the A side?
Mm-hmm.
It's now time for the A side, where we take a step away from the gruesome, murderous stories that Brooke tells, which are actually like they're super interesting, and I know many people love them. And I often say that they're like a lot to take in, but that's just because I have night terrors and I wake up screaming. So other than that, they're really just interesting stories. So my way to avoid some of, and I've had night terrors forever, not just because we started this podcast. So that's not.
Yeah, don't blame me for that.
No, that's like all the way back, my entire life. Like, so not because of the podcast. But I have been always searching for things to distract my mind and things that make me laugh and things that cheer me up. And especially up here in Minnesota, as Brooke, you and I talked a little bit, it's been super cold. So you can't go outside and get like any vitamin D or air, because if you go outside for too long, you lose like fingers and toes. My dog hates being outside, so she's not coming with me for longer than 5-10 minutes to do our business, and then we leave. So I have always struggled when I've lived in Minnesota in February and March, because they are the two longest months, or the coldest, hardest months of winter for me, at least. December, it's like, oh, this is new. Like October, November, like, oh, snow, that's fun. December, like, oh, it's festive. January is like, okay, it's getting really cold. We can do this. And then February and March are like, I'm just over it. So I have often sought out ways to add laughter and fun to my daily routine. And yesterday I was driving my oldest to a virtual theater rehearsal because you can't do real theater because of COVID, but they're doing a virtual production. And as we often do, we were playing music on our drive. And all of a sudden, as we're shuffling through my Spotify liked songs, comes on a song that I hadn't heard in ages, but was one of our favorites 6-7 years ago when the kids were younger, and we would have dance parties at the house to try to cheer ourselves up in the winter because you can't move. It's super cold outside, but you've got all this energy and you got to do something. So we would go on YouTube and find videos and music and dance around the house. And one of the first songs that we picked because of the video was back in 2013. And it was the extraordinarily absurd "What Does the Fox Say?" From the Norwegian group Ylvis. At the time, I remember it like came on. It was this huge like viral thing. Everybody is watching it. It was like the biggest video on YouTube of 2013. Yeah.
We can't play the actual song because I don't want to get a cease and desist or anything.
Yeah, but we could try to link to it on some of our sites, perhaps. Because I'm sending you a bunch of links to share with everybody.
Okay.
But most people know that song and they're like, oh yeah, remember that, and it goes out of their mind. I, however, back in 2013, fell into this entire black hole of Ylvis knowledge. So what most people, when they hear that song, they're like, oh, is this weird sort of catchy song that came out of nowhere for these guys who'd never heard of it, like a one-hit wonder that seems so stupid it was good. What it turns out, and Brooke, you may know this because you were doing radio at the time, and I'm sure you saw some of the interviews, whether it was on Ellen DeGeneres or Jimmy Fallon or any of these shows. But Ylvis was actually, they're a comedy duo, not unlike, The Lonely Island or Weird Al Yankovic or anybody that does comedy using music. They had their own show, very much like a Late Night with Jimmy Fallon or Tenacious D. Yeah, very similar. And the biggest irony of the entire thing is they were working with a production company called Stargate and Masonic, which were two like producers that had produced for big stars like Beyonce across the world. And they did a favor for them. And they said, well, do you guys want anything from us? And they're like, yeah, we want to record the world's worst pop song. So they record What Does the Fox Say? And they try to make it just as ridiculous as possible. There's like no way this is going to work. And it was supposed to support, like it was supposed to come out as a trailer for the third season of their late night show or their sort of talk show variety show, as this is what we did over our summer and it went really bad and everyone hates us. And we lost all this money and we blew this horrible, like sort of a gag thing. And then in one of the most perfect pop culture tornadoes ever, it blows up. And so now these guys who just did this as a lark to make fun of pop music are traveling all over the globe singing this ridiculous song and they even made a children's book. I mean, they appeared on all sorts of award shows, all because of What Does the Fox Say? So I started diving. It's like, hey, these guys are really funny. I didn't realize this was supposed to be a joke. I think most people just thought this was a really dumb song, but we all kind of liked it like it was the Macarena or Venga Boys or Barbie Girl. It was just like super over the top music that we enjoyed, but we'll probably never hear from these people again. That's when I discovered that they had an entire catalog of music and music videos and very, very funny songs that goes all the way back to the early 2000s. So the two brothers, Vergaard and Bard, Ylvasker, or Ylvis is the first part of their name, grew up as very musical. They played either the viola or violin. They were classically trained. The family lived all over the place. They lived in Africa for a few years, then finally moved back to Norway. And then they eventually became a comedy duo while they were in high school. They were performing, and a talent scout saw them and signed them up to start doing variety acts during the early 2000s. And they debuted. That's a hard word to say. Debut or debuted. They had a show called Ylvis and Cabaret, which is Ylvis and Cabaret, which was followed by Ylvis a Concert. So when you go in and you think, okay, these guys, What Does the Fox Say? You suddenly have 13 years worth of other music and other songs that they have already made. They released as an album in 2014, right after the What Does the Fox Say became such a huge hit, and had videos to go with all of them because they were doing TV shows. So everything was a video, and the visuals are as funny as the lyrics, and the talent within these guys is incredible. On their show that was running at the time, the Tonight with Ylvis, they had reoccurring gags, like, you know, very similar to like karaoke in the car or car karaoke or like getting coffee with celebrities. They had different, or like, what's his name, on the street when Jay Leno would do like the interview with the people on the street thing, and people would be like, wow, they don't know anything about anything. They had several running gags, which are all available on YouTube still. And they are absolutely hilarious. They would stand outside of a salon, one with a guitar and the other one singing, and someone would walk out and they would on the spot create a song about that person's new haircut.
Oh, wow.
And they're doing everything completely off the cuff. They would install a broadcast radio in a cab, and then they would be in a car directly behind the cab. Someone would get into the cab and they'd be driving to their destination. And suddenly on the radio is a song that they're composing in real time and singing, describing everything the person in the cab is doing or where they said they're going. And so you imagine this, you're in the car, you hop in a cab, and all of a sudden on the radio is a song that sounds like a legitimate song, but it is describing you completely and what you're doing looking out the window. And it's just completely throwing people off. One of my favorite of their skits or games or little segments was a kind of take on Ding Dong Ditch. So they would run up to somebody's house, but you could ring the bell and then you had to take 4 steps. So you could try to hide in those 4 steps. You could try to run away, but like you could only take 4 steps. So it was amazing to see them either figure out a way to hide so people wouldn't see them, or you get like 4 steps away or 2 steps away and the door opens and then they just freeze while these people are screaming at them in Norwegian. One of the challenges is that a lot of the stuff not challenges, one of the understandably natural things is this is a Norway late night show. So a lot of the dialogue is in Norwegian, but they also know like 6 languages apiece. So one of their favorite things to do on another sketch called The Intellivator was they would rig up an elevator so it didn't have any buttons. And somebody would walk in and then a voice would be like, welcome to the Intellivator. They'd ask them to pick their language, and then they'd play games with these people like, you have activated trivia elevator. To get to the 10th floor, you must answer 10 trivia questions, or randomly showing up on a floor and having a photo shoot happening, or stuffed animals of foxes, because obviously they were doing an homage to What Does a Fox Say?
Right.
And I completely recommend that if you are having a bad day ever, go to YouTube, search Ylvis, listen to some of their songs and videos. I mean, Stonehenge should be taught in school because it talks so much about the history of Stonehenge, but also asks what is going on with Stonehenge. You've got songs that kind of play off of the rap vibe, but spend the entire time describing an actual jacuzzi, or another one that talks about the former prime minister of Norway who goes on to work at the UN, and the entire song is basically like describing him as a superhero. They sound funnier they don't sound funny when I say them, but they are hilarious. So I would highly recommend diving in and checking all of their videos out, and all of the Untitled Ylvis, the Late Tonight with Ylvis videos. But one of the things that I discovered for the first time in doing research for this today is that there was a point when they could have become even more mainstream right after the What Does the Fox Say video hit big. And that still has almost 1 billion views on YouTube.
Wow.
Yeah, it is as of, I think June 2020 is the last time I saw it referenced. It was 979 million views.
Shoo.
Yeah, so they're closing in on 1 billion views on YouTube. It was a huge deal, and Comedy Central reached out to them and said, hey, we think you guys are really funny. We love What the Fox Says. We've seen your stuff, your show. Would you be interested in coming to LA and recording a pilot for a sort of comedy variety show that's going to air on Comedy Central? So they did. They came to LA in 2014. They wrote a bunch of stuff on their laptops. They stayed in hotels. They, did the Hollywood thing for a little bit. And what they found is Comedy Central kept giving them more writers and more people to be involved and more directors and other people in the cast. And it became something that wasn't authentic to them. And they're like, we're not California people. Mm-hmm. We've done all of our comedy and all of our, stuff in Norway, and we're just going to get back to Norway. And so they actually recorded a pilot, which I would love to see, but it's never been broadcast, hidden in a vault somewhere. Comedy Central, let them go back to Norway. And then when they were back in Norway, said, "Oh, we need some more for this pilot. Would you guys come back? Or we can't use it." And they're like, "Nah, you know what? We're good. We'll just stay in Norway and do our thing." So they right there could have had the whole, Hollywood experience and just said, "You know what? We're just really comfortable doing what we're doing, and what this feels like isn't really Ylvis, so we're not going to do it anymore," and walked away from the whole thing.
Good for them, though.
Yeah, that really impressed me because they've always seemed really, authentic and smart guys and very funny. But the temptation to, have something like that, because I got to think, if Comedy Central spending the money and they're bringing in these people, you're going to get at least one season. And you can take that money and then, if you don't want to do it anymore, walk away. I mean, Chappelle did it for a couple of years and then decided he was done. Yeah. But they were just like, this isn't me. It's inauthentic. It's not us. And it doesn't feel right. So we're not going to do it, which I really respect. So that actually, and I'll send Brooke you the link for that, because I had to find that on a Norwegian website that was talking about their new show that came out in 2018. Called Stories from Norway, and it was a bunch of musical videos. Like each episode was a musical about something that had recently happened. So one of them is like Justin Bieber's first recent concert in Norway and what he did just after, and they're very funny. And it's again a mix of English but also Norwegian. But clearly it was more, they wanted to tell stories that were authentic to them. And so they went back and did that, which I think is really cool. But I had to find this site and then translate it into English using Google Translate so I could read it. So if some of the details are wrong, I blame the translation, not me.
Blame Google. Sure.
It's probably a bit of both, So yes, they still have shows going on. They're no longer doing Tonight with Ylvis, but they have, a bunch of episodes of Stories from Norway. They are appearing on other shows with other collaborators they've had. But all of their stuff, a lot of their stuff is still on YouTube. And I highly recommend just go if you are having a bad day, if you are needing a laugh, if you want to just kind of escape for a second. Take a deep dive into the Ylvis videos beyond What Does the Fox Say? And I am sure you will find a favorite one. And I've noticed that over the last 7 years, when I've done this, my favorite ones keep changing. Like at first, I really loved Stonehenge and John England, which are great. But then it was like, oh, Massachusetts is kind of funny too. And then Acapella, where they kind of do a send-up of pentatonics, is hilarious. And then they bring in their little brother, who is a helicopter pilot in Portland, in America, for a video called I Will Never Be a Star, talking about his brothers get to be famous, but he doesn't get to be famous, which is incredibly meta and also quite clever. So there isn't one I wouldn't recommend. There's even one entirely about yogurt.
Okay, yeah.
Which they pull off. Another one about dairy intolerance. So their subjects are really all over the place, and you'll find something that makes your day. So Ylvis, thank you for What Does the Fox Say and all of the other stuff. What does the
fox say? Sorry.
Seriously, like that sound comes on, like everybody smiles. We're like, this is so absurd and over the top. And it's meant to be that, and it's so perfect. But yeah, check out their stuff. Intellivator, Radio Taxi, Singing to Strangers. It's all really funny stuff, and it feels very familiar to a lot of American comedy. even if the language barrier is a little different, it's still funny when you're paying attention. So check it out. That is the A side. Thank you, Gilvis, and go watch more. And we still don't know what the fox says.
All right. We never figured that out.
And also something I learned in this deep dive that I never knew before, and I kind of makes me a little sheepish for how many times my kids were running around singing it. Evidently, fox is slang for marijuana in Norway.
Oh, well, now the song makes a little more sense.
It does.
And now you get the ding, 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 ding.
Yeah. So, and the best part is, like, I learned that from a 2013 interview with Ellen DeGeneres. But the best part with these guys is you're never truly sure if they're playing with American audiences. Like, I don't know if that's true. I couldn't find anything that backed up that fox is slang for marijuana. So they may have just been pulling Ellen's leg. I have no idea. Which is why I love them.
But I'm just going to use it anyway.
Yeah.
Hey, man, you got that fox? I don't really ask that. My mom's listening. Norwegian word fox is also their slang for cannabis.
Okay, cool. Then they weren't
they weren't just pulling her leg.
But I mean, I kind of wish they would have been, because we wouldn't know. We'd be like, oh, yeah, of course, fox. And meanwhile, all of Norway is like, oh, those Americans.
But I guess the word is actually it's rev.
Oh, yeah. I'm guessing it's not fox.
It's not fox. No, it's rev. And the fox says the Norwegian word fox, rev, also is their slang for cannabis. Rez is thought to have partly been inspired by the song that carved out its a permanent place in meme history. What does the fox say?
Yeah. So what came first, the slang or the song?
Ooh, that's a good question.
Yeah. That could be its own podcast. What came first, slang or song?
Ding, ding, ding. Okay. All right. So is that the A side?
That is the A side.
All right. So
unless we want to violate some more rules about singing songs that we don't have copyright to.
No. Thank you again for checking in with us and checking out the podcast. If you would like to support the show, you can do that several ways. A-side, B-side, podcast.square.site is the website. We have merch. We have lots of merch. We've got sweatshirts, t-shirts. I've got on a sweatshirt right now. I've always got on one of our sweatshirts though, I think. Also, you know what we need? Because we are in a pandemic, we need joggers or PJs.
Oh, yeah.
I'm on it.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm on it.
I'm certainly not.
You can also, like Brad did, you can let us know if there's a story that you have heard of and you'd like us to talk about. You can email us. It doesn't just have to be murder. It could be a movie or a TV show. You know, let Adam do that rabbit hole deep dive into some old school shows and actors and things like that. A-side, B-side podcasts at gmail.com. You can DM us. We are on all the socials. We've got a Twitter, we've got a Facebook, we've got an Instagram, and you can also support the show by buying us a coffee like Roger did. Thank you, Roger. And I did get some good coffee. He told me, make sure you get some good coffee. So I did.
Yeah. None of that just straight black stuff at the gas station.
No, I got some straight frou-frou coffee.
There you
yeah. But you also can buy us a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/A-side, B-side pod. And we would really, truly, genuinely appreciate if you'd head on over to Apple and give us a rating, and a review would be lovely as well. So those are all ways that you can support the podcast. We thank you once again. Remember, bad vibes save lives. If you've got a bad vibe about somebody, I was just talking to my mom about a case where it was like someone met online and he somehow drugged her drink, and just bad things. So if you've got that bad vibe, just listen to it. It could truly save your life.
Yeah. And there's nothing worried about taking a drink with you when you leave the table. Just saying.
At all. Or give it to the bartender or something.
Yeah. Just take it with you. I like to schedule my bathroom breaks in between drinks.
There you go. Hey, don't worry about bringing that drink until I get back. Thanks.
Yeah, I'll be right back, but don't bring it yet because I want it to be ice cold.
Ladies, if you have a female server, she's going to completely get it. She's like, I got you, girl. All right. So there you go. That's another episode of A-Side, B-Side. Thanks, Adam.
Thank you, Brooke.
As always, thank you for listening to A-Side, B-Side podcast. If you enjoy the show, please, if you don't mind, head on over to Apple and leave us a rating or a review. And if you'd like to continue to support the podcast, you can do so by heading on over to Patreon, or you can buy us a coffee, as well as buying merch on our website, asidebsidepodcast.square.site. From Adam and I at A-Side, B-Side podcast, please remember to wear your mask, social distance if you're around people that don't live in your household, and just be safe and happy. Thanks again from us here at A-Side, B-Side podcast.